Thank you, Rick and Carolyn. I'm excited to be here. You guys always take us on a journey to a different place, to another place where we can contemplate loftier thoughts and ideas. And so I really want to thank you for that. We all keep coming back. So there's something very special about these gatherings, these devotional meetings. So anyway, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to speak. I'm really excited to introduce the topic of feminine leadership qualities. It's a subject I'm passionate about, and I consider myself to be somewhat of an expert. And ordinarily, it may sound a little arrogant for a guy to say that he's an expert on feminine leadership qualities, but I'm going to fully lean into that today, and hopefully when I tell you my story, it will make sense to you. So there's 4 things I want to do today. One is tell you the story about how I became this quote unquote expert. I also want to highlight what are some of these qualities that I'm talking about and their importance to reshifting the balance in the world. And then I want to talk about why we should elevate these qualities and how we can promote their development in both men and women. And at the end of the talk, I want to generate some questions, leave you with some questions that will create some further discussion and dialogue and help us all understand how we can champion these qualities in the world. So let me begin by sharing a little bit about my personal story, because I believe that every single person is on a journey. And I believe that that journey is about finding meaning and purpose and connection with others. I believe it's about discovery of self and one's talents, and ultimately how to use those talents and that discovery process to help the journey of others, as well as making this world a better place. So I want to share some elements about my journey that hopefully will make sense to you. You guys are looking at a picture of my family, my mother and father, Jane and Edward Howard, and my 5 sisters, Mary, Tina, Carolyn, Tracy, Rhea, my brother Gregory, and myself, Charles. And the reason this picture is important is because my family has shaped me in more ways than I was aware. And it really became evident as I continued on in my career. But what's unique about my family is that my mom and dad, when they married in the 1950s, interracial marriages in the United States were still illegal in more than 16 states. And so they were people of great vision and great belief and great values, and they believed in the oneness of humanity. And they had both independently found the Baha'i faith by the time they met each other, and they saw within the Baha'i community a great deal of support for intercultural and interracial marriages. So they themselves decided to get married in 1950, and the result of their blended family, long before Trevor Noah ever described his family in terms of chocolate, I used to talk about my dark chocolate sister, Mary, my 2 white chocolate sisters, Tina and Carolyn, and then that the 4 of us who came from the blended family, they comprised Tracy, Rhea, Gregory, and myself. We were the milk chocolate. So it's important to register this picture in your mind as I speak of the things that are to come, because what's unique about this picture is that there were 6 women in the family and only 3 men. And so I was raised in an environment where women had tremendous influence, and the feminine influence was very strong in my family. And that contributed to the person that I am today. So let me go back to some of the concepts I want to talk about, because when I went to college, I studied mechanical engineering. I was a guy who had multiple interests. I started, but eventually I had to choose a direction. And so I chose engineering, and I knocked on the doors all the way up until the end, and I made it through. And lo and behold, it was all the doors kept opening. So I figured that's the direction I should go in. But I always was a person who had multiple interests. So anyway, I started working as a mechanical engineer, as a process engineer. Then I went on to be a business area manager, later a production manager, a supply chain manager. Eventually I became a plant manager. But by the age of 36, I had an epiphany. And that awakening was an awakening that told me that maybe I was not on this earth to produce a product. Throughout that entire journey, where I had all those different roles, I was always very uncomfortable working in the environments that I was in. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I kept telling myself over and over again that if I simply climbed the corporate ladder high enough, eventually I would be comfortable and that everything would be fine. But here I am at age 36, and all of a sudden I'm at a high enough level where I should be comfortable. But I wake up one day after a year of working as a plant manager. I had previously been working for Procter & Gamble, and I left Procter & Gamble producing 12 million cases of product for the West Coast of the United States. It was toilet paper, the best in the world, but somehow or another that did not register for me as the contribution that I wanted to making the world a better place. And so I had left Procter & Gamble, and I went to work for this small biotechnology firm, and I was producing a different product. But then after a year of doing that work, I woke up one day and said, nope, this is not what I was put on this earth to do. And so that was a very scary moment for me, because I had invested a lot in my career. I had 2 small kids. I was getting paid a lot of money, but I was not feeling happy or fulfilled, or that was in fact how I wanted to contribute. So I really had to regroup, and I had to do some soul searching. By then, I had become aware that all the corporate environments that I had been a part of were lacking certain things, the things that made me more comfortable. They were lacking a balance between the masculine and the feminine. I felt many of those environments were also lacking in terms of their appreciation for diversity. Many of those environments paid a lip service to diversity, but when you got in the door, you had to learn how to walk a certain way, how to talk a certain way, how to present data a certain way. Otherwise, you were not seen or perceived as a promotable candidate. And so I also experienced in many corporate environments that professed certain values, but had a hard time living up to values and virtues. And so all of these things were part of my consciousness about what was lacking. And I kind of came to grips with part of what made me feel uncomfortable was that many of those things were lacking in the environments that I was in. So I had already decided that producing a product maybe was not what I was meant to do. And then all of a sudden I got the insight that maybe my product was not a physical product, but maybe my product was people, or helping to develop better people. And so right around that time, my wife and I had decided that we were going to live abroad, and we came to Brazil. That was 21 years ago. And so I decided to start a consulting business with the purpose of bringing to the world all of the things that I felt were missing. And so in the last 21 years, uh, at least 15 of those years, I've worked in consulting, and I've worked with the concepts of connecting people to purpose, connecting people to a concept called ikigai, which ikigai is a word that speaks about your motive force, you understanding what you do really well, what you're passionate about, what the world or organizations around you need, and then how to be compensated for that, how to earn your living doing that. In these 15 years, I've also worked a lot with the concept of values, virtues, and principles. And we know that values, virtues, and principles are critical to giving people resiliency in life, in the work world, having healthy relationships. We also know that principles are critical to finding the root cause solutions to any social problem, any problem in the work environment. If you can raise it to the level of principle, you can find practical solutions to those problems. I also have worked a great deal educating people about the multi-dimensional nature of human beings, the fact that we have not only the physical dimension, but we have the psychic, the emotional and mental dimension, and we also have the spiritual dimension, and that human beings are much more complete. They give their best when you are taking into account their entire or their whole self. In these 15 years, I've also worked a great deal with the concept of systemic thinking and learning organizations, helping people to understand the connection, interconnectedness of people and systems, and how to work effectively together to develop synergy and greater productivity. But the one concept that has been transformational in everything that I've done is the concept of servant-oriented leadership. And I did not realize how important this concept of servant-oriented leadership was and why I was so passionate about it until I recently went to a conference. Carolyn mentioned a conference that I attended in Lisbon in May. And I realized how important this concept of servant-oriented leadership was, because it embodies qualities that the world truly needs. And it embodies specifically feminine leadership qualities, qualities of service, qualities of cooperation, qualities of empathy and compassion, and connection to the common good or to the overall social good. And so when I went to Lisbon, it was a conference on sustainability, and I met a ton of incredible people from all over the world. The conference sub-theme was called Harnessing Corporate Power to Do Good. And there were a tremendous number of themes discussed. One of them was servant-oriented leadership. Another one was feminine leadership qualities. Others were related to philanthropy and the role of philanthropy in changing the narrative and doing good. But the conference was a conference of practitioners, people like myself all over the world who are trying to contribute to a better positive discourse on many of these issues and trying to affect change in corporations and in the world in general. So it wasn't a conference where all the answers were given. It was more of a conference where people were looking to consult about the solutions and share experiences and learn from each other. And so it was an amazing, amazing experience. Specifically, I connected to my own experience working these feminine leadership qualities over the last 21 years in the work that I had done. So what I'm sharing are 7 feminine leadership qualities. And this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought it would be an interesting exercise just to see what the world considers to be feminine leadership qualities. So I did a ChatGPT search. Most of you know what ChatGPT is. It's sort of like this incredible database of information that gets searched, and then it's this artificial intelligence bot that basically tries to process all that information and come up with some learnings. And so ChatGPT says that these are 7 of the most common feminine leadership qualities. So empathy, being able to understand and relate to the feelings of others. Cooperation, working with others to achieve a common goal. Communication, being able to effectively communicate with colleagues and clients. Flexibility, being able to adapt to changing circumstances. Creativity, thinking outside the box to come up with innovative solutions. Compassion, being able to show understanding and kindness to others. And then mentorship, which is nurturing and encouraging the unfoldment of potential in others. This last one is one I relate to 100% because it's part of my life's mission. It's what I do naturally. But I thought it was interesting to have these qualities highlighted because they're recognized, at least in databases all over the world. When you talk about what are some feminine leadership qualities, this is what comes up as a consensus. But why are these qualities important to the world? And stressing again that this is not an exhaustive list. Abdu'l-Baha, the son of the Prophet, founder of the Baha'i faith, talks about many other feminine leadership qualities. But Abdu'l-Baha also talked about the fact that the world in the past has been ruled by force, and man has dominated over woman by reason of his more forceful and aggressive qualities, both of body and mind. But the balance is already shifting. Force is losing its weight, and mental alertness, intuition, and the spiritual qualities of love and service, in which woman is strong, are gaining ascendancy. Hence, the new age will be an age less masculine and more permeated with the feminine ideals, or to speak more exactly, will be an age in which the masculine and feminine elements of civilization will be more evenly balanced. Now, this is a statement from Abdu'l-Baha that was written over 100 years ago. And it is truly significant because we are seeing more and more in the current days that this principle is coming into effect more and more. There is an analogy in the Baha'i faith that says that the world of humanity is like a bird, and that bird is comprised of 2 wings. One is man and one is woman. And that the analogy states that not until both wings are equally developed can the bird of humanity soar to its highest heights. And so we understand that the world is out of balance. All of that discomfort that I felt in the corporate environment, it was a part of that imbalance that I felt because I was nurtured with feminine leadership qualities. I was raised as a man to be comfortable embodying those qualities in my being, because we know that men and women both have a masculine and feminine side. A woman doesn't have just a feminine side, just as a man doesn't just have a masculine side. We are, to be a complete being, we have to have a balance of both. but the world in general forces us to be more one or the other. The body that we're born into often dictates which of those qualities become more prevalent in our being. But anyway, I talked a little bit about the conference that I attended, and at this conference, I talked about some of the incredible people that were there. And one incredible person that I met was a lady named Dr. Roya Akavan. She is a professor of communication and a researcher and a scholar who has done tremendous work helping to create and articulate a framework and a conceptual framework that will help us advance on the issue of feminine leadership qualities. And she actually talked to me in our first meeting about an institute for feminine leadership qualities that she was developing and she was in the process of launching. And from the minute she talked to me about that institute, I told her, I want to be a part of that. I want to be able to contribute to it as a man. And I connected to my own experience. I connected to my own experience working these feminine leadership qualities over the last 21 years in the work that I had done. But specifically, I mentioned her because the next part of my talk between now and the end, I will rely heavily on information that she shared. And I will actually quote verbatim from her site certain things that will generate questions for us about the topic. But let me share with you some of the research that she shared at the conference. She shared some research with all of us about what do advances in leadership research say. And summarizing much of what she shared studies that basically say that effective leadership, modern characterizations of effective leadership have become more consonant with the female gender role. The research showing from Egley and Carley, 2004. But the gist of the feedback was that feminine leadership qualities are in short supply in today's corporations. This came from a study from McKinsey and Company in 2008. And then she also summarized that studies on effective leadership have been showing a clear trajectory away from traditionally male traits toward traditionally female characteristics and emphasize leadership behaviors that women tended to engage in more frequently than men. Now, this is very important because we're seeing more and more that the corporate world that has been dominated by men is very much lacking and not attending to the needs of workers and of human development professionals as a whole. And so let me go specifically now to why we should elevate and how we can promote some of these feminine leadership qualities that I talked about initially. And I'm going to read almost verbatim from Dr. Akavan's site because I found no better articulation of some of these concepts than how she frames it in her site. So I want to make sure that credit goes to her because the last thing I would want to do is plagiarize her work. So in her site, she talks about global challenges can be resolved through leadership behaviors that focus on nurturing and empowering human beings. And she also says that this requires a paradigm shift in leadership toward values and behaviors that are in effect associated with feminine aspects of humanity. That she acknowledges that the world is out of balance, as Abdu'l-Baha says, and that we need to reshift the balance. And in reshifting that balance, one of the key things that we must do first is elevate some of these feminine leadership qualities to the same level that masculine leadership qualities have been elevated in the world. Many times people do not recognize that many qualities that women display or that men display that are different from the traditional ones, many of those feminine leadership qualities are in effect part of the balance that needs to be reshifted. So she says also that this shift must go beyond expanding the number of women in leadership positions to effect a complete transformation in how leadership is defined and enacted by all leaders. So this is critical because we're talking about something that a paradigm shift that has to take place, but this is not just something that applies to women. It's something that applies to men as well, because men have the ability to enact these leadership qualities just like women. And we need to learn how to value and appreciate them both in men and women. So then she also says in her site that embracing an empathetic, emotionally intelligent, and morally courageous approach to leadership is not the domain of just one gender. Both men and women are equally capable of it. But she goes on to say that this requires, however, a reckoning with the systemically ingrained and psychologically internalized values that have glorified power over service and control over empathy throughout millennia. So she acknowledges that this process that humanity has kind of gone through over many, many, many years is going to take some serious time and some serious effort for us to work through. But the thing that to me is really, really exciting in all of this is that quote from Abdu'l-Baha of over 100 years ago about the balance already shifting, us seeing that take place in society and in organizations today based on the research that Dr. Akavan shared. That is a really heartwarming idea. So let me share one more slide with you. I believe this slide has some questions that I put together, and I put together the questions directly from the questions and the comments and the conceptual framework that Dr. Akavan speaks about in her website, because I believe these are the central and critical questions that we need to be asking, and they're questions that my own experience over the last 20 some years have brought me to as well. So let me share this with you as the last slide I'm going to share. Okay. So the first question is, do you believe that global challenges can be resolved through leadership behaviors that focus on nurturing and empowering human beings? This is a key question that we have to all be thinking about, because if we believe it, then we've got to be committed to helping that process of nurturing and empowering people with these new leadership behaviors. Second question is, how do we create this paradigm shift toward values and behaviors that are associated with the feminine aspects of humanity? So this is another key question that we've got to answer. The third one is, why is it important that the paradigm shift go beyond expanding the number of women in leadership positions? And I think one of the key things that we can discuss in the question and answer section is how is the experience of women in corporations these days and over the last 20 or 30 years, and are women allowed to be authentically themselves, or do they have to wind up conforming to that concept of walking a certain way, talking a certain way, presenting data a certain way that I talked about? And then another question is, why must we effect a complete transformation in how leadership is defined and enacted by all leaders? Then a fifth question really gets at the heart of understanding that if these leadership qualities, these feminine leadership qualities, are not just the domain of women, but they can in fact be embodied by men, how is it that we cultivate these qualities in both men and women and make it okay for men to embody these qualities as well as women? And then the final question is a deeper question that we will have to reflect over and over and over again for a significant amount of time, but it's really about how do we reckon with the systemically ingrained and psychologically internalized values that have glorified power over service and control over empathy throughout millennia. So folks, I hope that these questions you will keep in the forefront or in the background of your thinking as we have this dialogue session. And so my job was really to stimulate discussion and to sort of introduce the topic, but I wanted to be crystal clear that although I may consider myself somewhat of an expert on feminine leadership qualities based on how I was raised and how I was nurtured, I do not consider myself a know-it-all. The answers to these questions we're going to find together, and it's going to take time and effort, but I'm committed to this issue as I know each one of you are committed to this issue. So having said that, let's open up the floor for any questions and dialogue.